Hello, I'm Robin. Welcome to Bookspin. 2026 is now upon us, so Happy New Year. I've got some exciting reading plans coming up for January. But before we get into that, here is my reading wrap-up for December 2025. Now, the first book I read in December was Catface by Clifford Simak. After having read City earlier this year and really enjoying that book being one of his most famous novels, I wanted to get into some more of Simak's work. City was only the second thing I'd read by him. But I've got about a dozen or so of his books in my collection. So I picked out this one, not knowing much about it. And I have to say, I loved it. I think I enjoyed it even more than City, actually. So it's a bit of a hidden gem. This book was published in 1978. It's also known as Mastodonia, which is its US title. And it's a time travel story. It's set in a small Midwestern town in which we follow a man and his dog. And Catface is the name of this strange creature which he discovers on his farm. It's an alien being, basically, which manifests at night in his orchard and takes the appearance of a cat's face. We soon learn that this creature comes from another world, has been stranded on Earth for countless eons, living in this vicinity, apparently immortal. But that's not even the most amazing thing about him. He also holds the secrets to time travel and can create time portals into the distant past. And this allows our protagonist to step into these portals and travel back to primeval eras, even back to the time of the dinosaurs, right? And then return to the present. This is the basic premise of the book, which gets established pretty early on, and then a whole lot more plot develops from this idea. I thought it was an absolutely delightful read. It's quite a cozy book, I think. There's a cozy feel that pervades throughout, despite the kind of far-fetched ideas and concepts. You've got this peaceful, rural setting, a likeable cast of characters, and a very entertaining story, actually. And there's also a sci-fi mystery at its heart, which is very compelling, and some nice humorous touches to boot, and some moments of poignancy, some philosophical reflection. Very satisfying to read, I think. And it's definitely inspired me to read more Simak in 2026. There are a couple of his books on my radar in particular, which I'm interested in. Project Pope and Time and Again, which I believe is another time travel story. After Catface, I moved on to Claire North's new book, Slow Gods, which was sent to me courtesy of Orbit Books at my request, so thank you very much to Orbit. Now, this book was published in November 2025, and it's a standalone space opera, very character-driven. I did enjoy this novel. It's beautifully written with some very intriguing themes and concepts. Now, I'm not going to do a review here. I can recommend this book. I will be talking about it more soon because I've been in touch with the author and I'm planning to do an interview at some point soon. So look out for that. But in the meantime, if you'd like to know more, Brandon over at Sci-Fi Brandon did a very good review. So I'll post his video in the video description if you're interested. Then I moved on to A Case of Conscience by James Blish, which is a classic from 1959. My first time to read this author. It's got a really intriguing story, this. We follow a group of scientists who are surveying an exoplanet called Lithia, and they're trying to establish what kind of relationship Earth should have with this planet. But this decision is a little bit complicated by the fact that Lithia is home to an intelligent race called the Lithians, whose civilization is incredibly different to ours. So these are a reptilian race of beings. They are innately peaceful and calm and rational, without any need for institutions of authority. So they are inherently good, basically. This all comes to them naturally, and this is a major head scratcher for one of the main characters, who is a Jesuit priest, as well as being a biologist on this expedition. So he has strong religious convictions, and he comes to a rather shocking conclusion about just what Lithia is and what the Lithians actually represent. And really the main focus of the narrative is this priest's inner conflict as he comes to terms with this planet and what it means for humanity and his faith. But things get more interesting still in the second half of the story, when the Commission returns home to Earth bearing an unexpected gift from the Lithians, an unborn member of their species, which is going to have consequences back on Earth. So I did enjoy this novel. The world building is extremely rich and fascinating. I loved reading about this planet and the life cycle of the Lithians, which is really unique. And the theological stuff was also quite intriguing. It reminded me a little bit of The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell, which also had a Catholic priest exploring an alien planet. But there's also some definite vibes from Stranger in a Strange Land in the second part of the story, in the way that a kind of cult of personality develops around this alien back on Earth. But of course, both of these books came out after A Case of Conscience. I will say, though, that the pacing is a bit uneven, and the second part of the story on Earth is not quite as compelling as the first part on Lithia. But overall, it's a satisfying and thought-provoking read. Finally, I finished off Who Goes There?, the short story collection by John W. Campbell. Now, I've already talked about my disappointment with the title novella a few times, so I won't repeat myself. But I really wanted to finish this off, get this book over with by the end of the year, and I've finally done so. The short stories that I read, unfortunately, weren't great on the whole. They weren't all as bad as the novella, but it was a little disappointing on the whole. There were a few interesting ideas, but the execution just wasn't very satisfying. The prose was dull and often repetitive, and the characters are all very one-dimensional. I think that's a major reason why I couldn't get on with these stories. I couldn't tell anyone apart in these stories, and as such, I felt quite devoid of any emotional connection to the characters. Also, the themes of the stories were quite repetitive. One recurring theme that keeps coming up again and again is exploring ghost cities in a dead world. I don't want to be totally negative. There was one story which I did like, which again follows on with that same theme. This story is called Dead Knowledge, and it's quite a compelling sci-fi mystery in which the characters follow... Well, we've got some explorers following the ruins of a civilization of an alien planet which has been frozen in time. The aliens all mysteriously killed themselves and their bodies are perfectly preserved throughout the ages. It's got kind of Twilight Zone vibes to it. And unlike the other stories in this collection, this one did have quite a satisfying ending, because most of the other stories ended very abruptly. I would say that is a 3-star story, maybe, but the other stories were 2 stars, even 1 stars, unfortunately. Who Goes There itself, the title story, was a 1-star read. So a bit of a damper really to end my reading year with, which is funny, right? Because my first read of 2025 was also a 1-star read. If you have a look at my 2025 wrap-up video, which I posted a couple of days ago, which is actually very rare for me. I hardly ever get 1-star reads. Overall, 2025 was a fantastic reading year for me. Anyway, let's move on to my January TBR. So the first book which I'm going to read, which I've actually already started reading, I've read the first few pages, is Alistair Reynolds' new book, Halcyon Years, which is a kind of sci-fi noir thriller. Very excited to read this. I'm actually reading this as a buddy read with 2 other booktubers. Brandon from Sci-Fi Brandon, who I've already mentioned, and Audrey from Audrey Approved. So, really looking forward to this. We will have a discussion video at some point later in the month. After Halcyon Years, I'm going to move on to Norstrilia by Cordwainer Smith. His one and only novel in the Instrumentality of Mankind universe. This is part of my Cordwainer Smith reading project, in which I'm going through all of his stories, reading and reviewing them all here on this channel. I've got one more short story I'm going to read, The Ballad of Los Camel, before I move on to Norstrilia. What else? Okay, so audiobooks. One thing I'm going to try doing this year is listening to more audiobooks, or at least more regularly. So I'm thinking maybe 1 audiobook a month alongside my physical books. It's nice to have something to listen to every now and then, and I tend to branch out more into other genres, especially non-fiction, when it comes to audiobooks. But that won't be the case for my January pick. I'm choosing for my audiobook for January Machinehood by S.B. Divya. I've enjoyed S.B. Divya's work before. I thought Meru and Loka were both great, and her novella Runtime was stunning. So I'm looking forward to reading this one. It's a kind of SF thriller. I don't know much about it, but I believe this one is set in the near future, unlike Meru and Loka, that duology, which is a kind of far future space opera. I don't have a physical copy, so that's why I've decided to give the audiobook a try. Aside from those books, there are some other possibilities that I may end up reading in January. It's going to be a mood read, right? So whatever I read after Norstrilia will be a mood read. That said, I do have a few possible contenders which I'm excited to read, and these are all vintage sci-fi novels. The Flying Eyes by J. Hunter Holly, which looks very pulpy. Time's Last Gift by Philip Jose Farmer. I love time travel novels and I love Philip Jose Farmer, so I don't think I can go wrong with this one. And A Time of Changes by Robert Silverberg. I'm definitely going to read this book soon. The only question is, how soon? So that might end up in my January reading as well. We'll see. But yeah, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. I'll see you again soon.